It's a warm afternoon in the springtime of 2019. I'm 12 years old and I've made plans to go to the bike jumps near my school with my close mate Tony. Okay, now we would do this once or twice every week and then spend the entire weekend virtually riding around the suburb on our bikes. So we head to the bike jumps on this particular day, and it's nothing out of the ordinary. You know, it's the usual boys from school who are there. But amongst these boys is this kid who, for the sake of this story, we will call Jason. Now, Jason and I didn't exactly get along. He was one of those kids who would always talk shit, you know, be super lippy, super bad-mouthed to you. And even at the slightest sign of aggression, he would back down, say sorry, say he's joking. And then as soon as you back down, he'd start going with the insults again. So for that reason, I really didn't like him. But anyhow, on this day, he's not too bad. You know, he says a few things. I just tell him to shut the fuck up and I end up leaving at around 5 p.m. Yeah, I ride back home. But a few weeks go by, and once again, I've made plans to hang out with my close mate Tony after school one afternoon. This time we weren't on our bikes, so the bell rings to go home from school, and we walk up the road to Tony's house. It was only like a 5-minute walk from school. We go into his house, Tony gets changed, and we start making plans for what we're going to do on this particular afternoon. We come up with the plan that we're going to walk to the jump, see if anyone's there, then we'll go to the fish and chip shop, get some chips. All right, cool. So Tony and I start walking to the bike jumps, get there once again around 5 minutes later, everything's super close. And it's the usual boys who are there. You know, Jason's there, all the other boys who I actually liked are there. And Jason's being super lippy on this particular day. You know, it was like he would have these little phases he went through where he'd sort of be quiet and then he'd arc up again, that sort of thing. Now, for reference, I was a lot bigger than virtually all of the kids my age, okay? And by bigger, I mean taller. So that was a thing that was sort of intimidating, or that was like the cool thing in primary school. So I didn't exactly have to say much to Jason to make him shut up. But this day he was really getting on my nerves. So I said something to him which I would quite often hear from my older brother. I said, "Watch yourself, you little cunt, or I'll give you a smack in the head." All right, so obviously after this, he stops talking, he stops piling on the insults and being fucking annoying. And we decide to leave around 10 minutes later. We're gonna walk back to Tony's house and just kick back there for the rest of the afternoon. So we're walking back, and on the way to Tony's house, we would always have to cut through this big football field, all right? So we're doing that, we're walking through the field, and I would say as we're around halfway through the field, I see at the corner of my eye this big group of boys, right? So I turn my head and I see there's around 4 or 5 what look to be 15, 16-year-old kids around this sort of football shed. We get towards the edge of the field to get onto like the main road to get back to Tony's house. And that's when I realized what they're doing, okay? They're punching cones. I can see them doing it, just broad daylight, right? It would have been like 5 o'clock by this point. Yo, brother, if you're enjoying this video, please hit the subscribe button. You have no idea how much it helps me out. I know my close mate Jack is quitting YouTube for the time being. Many of you will know him. So it's time for another strong young leader to take over, and I believe that is me. So if you're enjoying this content, hit the subscribe button. I'll let you get back to the video. So I say to Tony, "Oh, we should go see him. You know, they look like mad cunts." And Tony doesn't seem for it, you know, he just doesn't say anything. But I start walking up to them, and as I'm walking up to them, they're walking up to me, all right? But Tony just continues walking, okay? He doesn't want anything to do with it, but I was sort of in my own world. I wasn't really focused on him. Didn't take any notice that he had gone off by himself. So I go up to these guys, or rather they come up to me, and they start talking to me. And that's when I realize I know one of these motherfuckers, okay? 2 of them, actually. They both used to be friends with my older brother, okay? So they're talking to me, asking what I'm doing. I just say, "Oh yeah, I'm hanging out with my mate. He seems to have gone missing. I don't know where he went." And I say to them, "Oh, are you guys, you know, punching cones?" It's not exactly what I say, but I have to say it for this video. And they say, yeah, bro, we are." And this is when one of them pulls the billy out from behind them and says to me, "Do you want one?" Okay, now once again, for reference, I was exposed to this shit at an extremely young age. I'm not gonna go into detail, but when I was 9 years old, that is when I first started getting into this, all right? So obviously now, wanting to be the cool, popular 12-year-old, I say, "Fuck yeah, give me one." And I have one. And little did I know it at the time, one of these boys had their camera out and was filming me as I did this, which I'll get to in a sec. So this guy lights it up for me. I have it done and dusted. I say goodbye to these boys, tell them I'll see them later, you know, they're mad, all this sort of thing. And I start walking back to Tony's house. Now, as I'm walking, I definitely wasn't feeling the effects, at least not like I did in future experiences, but my judgment is definitely clouded and I'm thinking very differently to what I usually do. Okay, now the basic sort of thing I knew when you did this was that you got super hungry. So I walk back to Tony's, get inside, and I make it very apparent that I've just been, you know, punching cones. I literally tell him and his sister. And although I thought it was cool at the time, I could tell without them even saying anything to me that they thought I was a complete fuckwit, which I was, to be fair. So I get home that night, you know, my mum picks me up and I start talking to my older brother, Scott. He asked what I'd been up to that afternoon. And I tell him about this whole experience at the bike jumps with Jason. I really make it sound like I nearly got into a fight. I'm trying to sound like this really fucking cool kid. And that's when he straight out just cuts the noise and says to me, I know you were s***ing this afternoon, you little c***. What have I told you about doing that? And he starts giving me just like this full lecture about how bad it is for you and that if he finds out I do it again, he's gonna tell mum and dad, which would have f***ed me completely at the time. But I end up promising him that I'm never going to do it again. Obviously, that turned out to be a lie, as many of you will know. Shut the fuck up! But it gets to the following weekend, just a short few days later, and I've made plans to stay at my best mate Crocker's house for the night. Now, the plans for this night were nothing special, you know, we're going to play Minecraft, eat shitty food, talk shit, stay up late as fuck. So that's exactly what we do. We end up going to bed probably 3:30 a.m. And we get up reasonably late the next day as we usually would. But around 1 o'clock, 2 p.m, we start making plans for what we're gonna do on this particular day. Now, let me just tell you, this is where the story really kicks off. What you read in the title, it's not clickbait, this is exactly what happens. I'm about to tell you that in full. So Crocker and I organized to meet up with this girl who I actually still went to school with, named Charlotte. Now, every time we would see Charlotte, let's just say I very much enjoyed spending time with her. All right, so we go around to Charlotte's house, hang out with her for a couple of hours. But it's after this that we decide we want to go do something. You know, we want to walk around before the sun sets, see what's going on. And Crocker and I come to an agreement that we're going to go to the bike jumps and then go to the fish and chip shop to get some chips straight after. That was like the go-to back then. So we walk from Charlotte's house to the bike jumps. It's maybe a 10-minute walk. And once again, you know who's there? It's Jason, okay? Jason and the other boys from school who I actually like. Now, I don't know what was going through my head on this particular day, but for whatever reason, I actually instigate the insults with Jason. So as soon as we get there, I say, Jason, you little f***, what are you doing here? And straight away shit kicks off, you know, he's insulting me back. And I know it's because his older brother is there with him. Never would he insult me back. If I said something like that to him, he would just back down. But he's not, okay? So he starts arcing up to me and saying all these insults to me. And I say, you want to watch it, you little c***er, or I'll deck ya. You know, just going in with the insults my brother would say to me. And that's when his older brother, who we will call Tobias, gets involved. And Tobias says to me, don't fucking talk to my little brother like that. And I start laughing and I say, yeah, what are you gonna do? Now, just quickly, bit of a backstory on Tobias. Yes, he was a year older than me, but once again, nowhere near my size. And we had gone together to school together the year before. He was now in grade 7. Of course, I'm in year 6. So Tobias proceeds to tell me, you wanna watch it, Vibe, I'll hurt you if you keep going on my little brother. And that's when Crocker and I just start pissing our pants, because this guy, despite being a year older, just was not threatening whatsoever. He was the guy that sort of got looked down upon in school. So Crocker and I are standing there laughing, and this is when I look at Tobias and say, you're a pussy, bro, you won't do shit. And that's when he looks me in the eyes, right? And this is where shit gets fucking tense, okay? He looks me in the eyes and he says, do you want to bet? And just as he's saying this, he pulls a chingy out about yay big, all right? Now, in this moment, there were many thoughts that could have gone through my mind. But the one thing that did was, he's not gonna do anything. He's too much of a bitch, he won't do it. But as soon as Crocker sees this, right, he's standing behind me, he's about here, right? He says, Luke, let's go. And I say, nah, he's not gonna do anything, right? I'm acting all cocky, acting like I'm invincible. And Crocker says, bro, we should just go, you know, like it's not worth it. And I say to Tobias, bro, you're not gonna do anything with that. You're a little pussy. And I'm acting like this tough something I wasn't. And once again, he says, are you sure about that? Now, just to be completely clear, I do not encourage anyone to do what I did in this situation if it ever turns out you are in this same situation. But what I say next is just like, what the fuck? I say to him, do something then, and I start yelling, all right? Do something. And by this point, Crocker's behind me saying, Luke, let's fucking go, let's go. It's not worth it, let's just go, bro. And I'm just going back and forth with Crocker saying, nah, he's a bitch, he won't do it, he won't do it. Now, for a split second there, you would have looked into Bias's eyes and said, he's gonna fucking do it. Okay, it really seemed like I was riling him up. I was really getting him into the emotional state. I thought he was at least gonna punch me, you know? But finally, he puts it down, you know, he folds it back up, puts it in his pocket, and he says, fuck off, Vidler. And I say to him, yeah, that's right, you're a bitch. So pretty much immediately after that, Crocker and I decide to dip. We're gonna tell my older brother about what just happened. So we get a couple 100 meters up the road and we call my older brother, who is like the middle brother between myself and Scott, tell him exactly what happened. And obviously he's fuming, you know, he says, do you want me to come now? You know, I'll bring my chingy. And I say, yeah, do it, this and that. But for whatever reason, he doesn't end up coming. We just decide we're gonna go home. You know, we get some chips, have dinner, go home. Now, bro, just to be clear, it does not end here. It gets to the start of 2021. So a full year and a half have gone by since this had happened. And I'm finishing up at the gym one afternoon with my older mate, who was a couple of years older than me, right? We're walking over to the supermarket to get like a post-workout meal. And I see to Bias, right? Jason's older brother, who had just pulled this chingy on me a year and a half before. Now, you would think by this point I would have gotten past it. I wouldn't worry about doing anything or saying anything to him. But that's when I tell my mate, oi, that's that pulled a chingy on me. We should go up to him. So we do. And I start fucking feeding this with insults, you know, like really making myself out to be a bigger man. And I genuinely thought I was at the time. I thought because I was much bigger than him now that I was like something I wasn't. Okay, so I say to him, yeah, bro, you want to pull a knife on me now? You won't do it. You're a little bitch. And he's just sort of like backing away. He's backing up and he's not saying anything. And he says, I'm sorry. You know, he's like really apologetic for it. And I'm just going in. And it pains me to say it, bro, but this did end up happening another 3 or 4 times. You know, there was a few instances, seen him up at the shop. It was the same sort of thing with my mates, trying to act a certain way to this kid. And I mean, bro, there's many things I could have to say about this story, which I have just told, but I just want to unpack it a bit here, okay? The way I treated this situation so casually at the time, okay? It doesn't matter about the person. When you're in that situation, someone has literally got a chingy held at your face. You should not treat it as nonchalant and as casual as I did. The smart thing of me to do would simply just been to say, all right, bro, yeah, nah, all good, it's chill, we're just gonna leave, okay? But instead I tried to be the bigger man. I tried to act like something I wasn't. And of course, the second part of this would be just the fact that I couldn't let it go, bro. The fact that I held a grudge for so long. It had nearly been 2 years. This guy probably completely forgotten about it. And I'm stood there in front of him making threats. And not just once, 3 or 4 times. And it doesn't make me proud to say it. It's fucking horrible, bro. As many of you will know, throughout high school, I was constantly trying to be something that I wasn't. Being a person that was hiding behind a mask for validation from other people. And I thought if you could intimidate people, that gave you some form of status that made you cool in the eyes of everyone else around you. But it doesn't. What it does is it makes you a loser who's so insecure in the way that he is, he feels the need to be validated from external sources. And it's not just about holding a grudge, it's about what holding a grudge does to your mind and your mentality, all right? If you're constantly fixated on what's happened in the past and using that to dictate what happens in your future, you're going to be depressed, anxious, and overall live a lesser quality of life. And I know this to be true because that is exactly what I became. I was constantly fixated on the past and holding a grudge against this person and, you know, I don't like them, I don't like her. You know, I was constantly fixated on what I can do going forward to build this image of myself as the respectable, popular guy. And I became that conehead, pepperoni face, fugly cunt that no one wanted to speak to because I was so riddled with insecurity, anxiety, depression, all of these things. And it was purely at my own will. I have no one else to blame. I'm not a victim, it's my fault. And it may sound pretty wacky given the story that I've just told, but this is simply just what I'm able to take away from that situation. All right, bro, so let me just leave you with this. If you focus on problems, you will have more problems. But if you focus on possibilities, you will have more opportunities. I hope this video helped. If it did, hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate you watching till the end. See you in the next one. Stay grinding, my G. Yo, what's cracking, my G? Just wanted to let you know my brand Hectic Threads is doing a killer deal at the moment. $50 off an iconic logo hood using code SNUGGEDUP right now at checkout. Guys, this deal is not gonna last forever. We ship worldwide. Hectic Threads is going fucking global. So if you like what you see, you like this content, you can get behind the vision, go cop yourself one.